Hello, I am Master Sergeant Melody Goydam, Food and Beverage Operation Manager at AFPC Services Directorate. Welcome to the Essential Station Messing ESM Training Brief. The purpose of this training is to provide you with guidance on the ESM program. In this lesson, we'll discuss the ESM background, the ESM process, the ESM roster. We'll look at the responsibilities, the Air Force Form 220, and lastly, tips and reminders. Now let's begin with the background. ESM is applied uniformly for all enlisted members permanently assigned to single government quarters at the same installation or base. Exception: when assigned duties cause an individual to miss a percentage of meals, the government will furnish on a monthly basis. Ultimately, it's up to the unit commander to decide who is eligible for BAS. The Food Service Office doesn't determine who is authorized. The military service established service-wide written criteria for the installation commanders responsible for single government quarters and messing to use in setting the rules for implementing ESM at the local level. This means each base can have a local policy on how to implement the ESM program. The Joint Task Force, JTF commander, or the commander of one or more military services determine whether to authorize ESM when members perform a duty in the JTF environment. Now that we've discussed the background, let's look at the ESM 220 process. Step 1 is where the member initiates the Air Force Form 220. The Form 220 is used to start or stop BAS. Once the member's status change, i.e. marriage, divorce, or moving in or out of the dorms, the member will begin routing the Form 220 by contacting the unit ESM Control Officer or the First Sergeant. The ESM Control Officer is normally the First Sergeant or whoever the commander deems responsible for this task. Step 2. Once the member turns in the Form 220, the unit decides if the member is authorized. They complete it with the commander's signature. Step 3. After the commander signs the form, the unit forwards the original copy to finance, provides a copy to the Food Service Office, a copy to the member, and maintain a copy. Unless there is a local policy that states differently, this is the process as discussed earlier. Step 4. Finance receives the Form 220 from the unit, reviews for accuracy, and updates the member's status. And lastly, Step 5. The Food Service Office updates the member's status in CFS or crunch time and maintains a copy of the Form 220. Now that you understand the Form 220 process, let's discuss the roster process. Step 1. This process begins with the Food Service Office creating a roster or tracking sheet of the ESM members to send out to the units for verification of the member's status. This process must be performed on a monthly basis at a minimum. Finance will provide the BAS verification listing to the units every 6 months. Step 2. The unit receives the verification roster or listing, reviews it, annotates changes, determines the status, and returns the ESM roster to the Food Service Office and the BAS listing to Finance. Step 3 and 4. If the member pay requires adjustment, then a Form 220 process will begin. The verification process is a critical part of this program. Action must be taken promptly once the member status changed to avoid any government loss. There have been several audits within the last year that resulted in the Air Force financial loss and members incurring government debt. The ESM roster process is pretty simple to understand. Let's look at some responsibilities in this process. The members should provide accurate information regarding eligibility, such as resident location, duty hours, to the unit commander or the unit ESM Control Officer. The member is also responsible for reviewing their leave and earnings statement to ensure the meal charges are deducted. The unit ESM Control Officer uses entitlement criteria to determine the member's eligibility for ESM and verifies the member is receiving BAS. They also complete the Form 220 and obtain the commander's signature. They provide a copy of the form to the members as verification, forwards the original form to Finance, and a copy to the Food Service Office within 3 days of the member's status changing. They will maintain a copy of the form, receive the ESM roster monthly, review for accuracy, annotate changes, determine if the member's pay requires adjustment, and return the roster to the FSS Food Service Office. Lastly, they will receive the BAS verification listing every 6 months, review for accuracy, annotate changes, and return to the Finance Office. The unit commander appoints a primary and alternate unit ESM Control Officer in writing. and provide a copy to the food service office. The commander signs the member's 220, ensure the original form is provided to finance, and a copy is provided to the food service office. And as appropriate, the commander initiates requests to remove members from ESM. The food service office receives the 220 from the unit, reviews for accuracy, updates the ESM automated system, and maintains a copy on file. They also send out a monthly validation roster for units for verification. The finance office receives the 220 from the unit, reviews for accuracy, updates the pay file, and maintain a copy on file. They also provide the BAS validation listing to the unit every 6 months. This is a copy of the Air Force Form 220. As you can see, this is the form that the commander will sign. AFI 34-145 states members request start and stop of ESM privileges through the unit commander. Only the unit CC can authorize BAS. The members initiate requests using Form 220 in accordance with FSS Squadron Guidance. The unit ESM Control Officer and the unit CC determine eligibility by approving and disapproving BAS based on the criteria. The unit forwards the original Form 220 to finance to start, stop, or change BAS, and the unit provides a copy to the food service office. We highly recommend the airmen hand carry these 220s to the food service office. Air Force Form 1469, Subsistence in Kind Entitlements Log, will be only used to collect personal information for patrons to prove they are authorized ESM privileges, not to create Aloha or other ESM accounts. The 1469 is not used to validate ESM status. Use the 220s in the verification process to update the ESM status. 1469 is sent to finance to validate the BAS. Use the 1469 if the airmen have not in process the unit, i.e., if they PCS and arrive on a weekend. However, the unit commander must decide if a member is authorized BAS or not. The Form 220 is the official document to start, stop, or change BAS. It is only used to create or terminate ESM accounts, not the 1469. The 220 is to be completed within 3 duty days of the member's status change, per AFI 34-145. Until then, the member will sign the 1469. Once the member's status changes, start the 220 process. If action is not promptly taken, the member will incur government debt, and government debt may cause financial hardship to any airman. There have been several audits recently where the members had to pay thousands of dollars because they were receiving both entitlements. This not only affects the member, but it affects the Air Force as a whole. So ensure all commanders, first sergeants, and unit ESM managers are aware of the 220 process, roster validation, and AFI 34-145 guidance. Ensure cashiers have control of all forms at all times, and protect any personal information from unauthorized disclosure. And lastly, place Privacy Act cover sheet on top of the form or clipboard at the register. Now that you understand the ESM process, let's review what we discussed. We discussed the ESM background, ESM process, the ESM roster process. We looked at some responsibilities. We also looked at the form. And lastly, tips and reminders. Thank you.